the right thing by keeping it at 12%?
Thank you, Kaji. I think your question answers itself because you indicated much earlier on that interest rates have been rather high. I think what we should ask is what are the implications of high interest rates? Okay, high interest rates affect all our lives in various ways. The importance of interest rates, particularly the central bank benchmark rate, in various countries it's called various names, but basically what it is the benchmark rate of each country's central bank. Is often regarded or is generally regarded as a major indicator of where government wants the economy to go. So that people look expectantly when the governor of the Federal Reserve, for example, what he's going to say about interest rate, whether it's going to go up by 1/4% or 0.5%, that dictates to the private sector, to the business community, that this is what is going to happen in the economy. But regrettably, in our own environment, we find that there appears to be no correlation between the benchmark rate and the commercial rates in the market. I say this because even when monetary policy rate was maybe 8–9% or whatever, commercial lending rates remained in the 20s and things like that. If there was any response, it was a minimal response. So in other words, the interest rate is usually a benchmark of where an economy wants to go, because why? High interest rates don't make it possible for industrialists to thrive, particularly in a country like Nigeria, where there are so many infrastructural deprivations. If you had to pay 20-something% to borrow money, you would be committing suicide if you are involved, particularly in the area of manufacturing, where the gestation could be as much as 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Borrowing at 20% and saying you are going to set up an industry will create a lot of problems for you. And if you are restrained from wanting to exploit the opportunities in the market because of the high cost of borrowing, then of course you are also precluding the possibilities of creating job opportunities for Nigerians. So you can see that the interest rate is tied to the ability of the country to create jobs, tied to the ability of the country to produce goods, tied to the ability of the country to produce yams and gari and God knows what, and is tied to almost every facet of our lives. So interest rate is very, very important, and the benchmark central bank rate is supposed to be an indicator. But as of now, the difference between the central bank benchmark of 12%, excuse me, and commercial lending of 20-something%, I mean, is inexplicable, and the authorities themselves have never been able to explain.
Can you see anything good coming out of this? Because I'm sure that the central bank must have several good reasons for this action. Can you see any
for retaining the benchmark at 12%?
Yes. They gave reasons like the global price of oil and oil theft and the likes of it.
Those reasons are for people who don't understand the system, or who
tell us more about
no, I tell you the truth. I mean, you know, the central bank and the monetary authorities have, I've said this several times, and I say it without any apologies, have succeeded largely in hoodwinking Nigerians, okay, with this information. And Nigerians, I mean also the media. For example, we have a situation where we, as a country, we give our money to the banks and we borrow the money back. Okay? How do we borrow the money back? When we sell treasury bills, when the central bank sells treasury bills. I dare say, and I include your outfit here, when you all report this event of selling treasury bills, you make it sound as this is a benign, or it would have a benign impact on the economy. As if to say, giving your money to the banks and borrowing it back at 13–14% is a wise and sensible thing to do. But you say it with glee. You know, in all media, it is disinformation, because it can never be beneficial for anyone to give his own money to the banks and borrow it back at 13, 14%. But for 13, 14 years that I've been saying these things, all media without exception, they don't even consider, analyze the content of what they are being fed. They read it at their news bulletins and things like confidently.
That's why we have
whereas they are disinforming
like
the people on the impact. It is a negative impact. It is a destructive impact. But to have the media also stand up and say it to the people as if it was a beneficial thing, I think it's a rather unfortunate thing.
Okay, I'll come back to that conversation, but let's ask Martin now. Martin, what's your thought on keeping the interest rate at 12%?
I think for the CBN, the interest rates, they work with a monetary, they have what they call a toolbox, okay? So when you're trying to manage the economy, interest rate, like Mr. Boyo said, is one of the tools you have, okay? But I think when you look at the cost of doing business in Nigeria, the interest rate is just one of the components. So if I'm trying to produce something and I go to a bank and borrow money, it's going to come to me at a cost, okay? But if you look at the way businesses are run, there are so many other costs that add up to your, that make up your cost of doing business. You have to run your generator, you have to, provide security, transportation, all that, adds up to your cost, okay? And then I think, if you also look at the way the system works, when CBN reviews the interest rate, they also have at the back of their mind, they're also looking at the exchange rate component. Because if you allow too much liquidity in the system, that can feed into, that can weaken your currency. Okay, so sometimes they try to make some of these preemptive moves to say, look, and then don't forget that as the apex bank, they know, they can see all the financial flows. And if you look at what's happening, like, I think, your co-host was trying to allude to that. Because if you look at their reasons, they're saying, look, come 2015, there are going to be many of all these transactions floating around. And if you allow that to happen, the exchange rate, they say, look, we're already seeing pressure. So, and I think one fundamental responsibility of any central bank is